we'll move to Q&A, have a conversation with all of you. So Eric, can you start us off a little bit about your background and the intersection of data and transportation?
Sure. Thanks very much, and really happy to be here. My name's Eric Sundquist. I work at the University of Wisconsin. I work on a project called the State Smart Transportation Initiative. We do outreach and technical assistance and convening of state DOT executives, and that's why I'm here today. We've been working with Hawaii DOT today and tomorrow on with the items of interest with them. And so data, and one of the reasons that I think I was invited here, has become really, really critical to the field that we're working in. I'm not an expert on startups and entrepreneurship or on venture capital or any of those sorts of things at all. And I watch Silicon Valley, and it's about the extent of my knowledge. But what I am really interested in, and I know the word is overused in that field, so I'm going to use it advisedly, but it's disruption. We have some really, really bad practices that have gone on for decades and decades in transportation, partly for lack of data, lack of analysis, lack of knowledge. And there are now, with computing power and new data sources and bright entrepreneurship, there are ways to circumvent that, transcend it, disrupt it. So one example is something you probably all looked at if you've looked for an apartment or a house, is WalkScore. It was started in Seattle. Some folks who had been at Microsoft 10 years or so ago, they went out on their own and started a mission-driven for-profit, as they call it, that really just went on they weren't transportation planners. They weren't steeped in the sort of despair that we have been about the state of the practice. These were people who just thought intuitively, wouldn't it be nice if people knew how accessible their apartment was going to be to the grocery store or to wherever? And so with the emerging availability of what is called points of interest data, and they get it from Google, and a street network, which is readily available in GIS, they combined the two, created a score somewhat arbitrarily, and being Seattle, I think they sort of overestimated the need to have multiple Starbucks nearby. But, they were the first in, and they defined it, and it's taken off. It's great. It's now really affecting how people personally make transportation, their own decisions about transportation, meaning where am I going to live and what kind of transportation am I going to use after I move there. And it's starting to infect slowly, because the wheels turn slowly in government, because there are statutory requirements and practice, and this is starting to affect the way planners and engineers think about transportation. So traditionally, in transportation, we don't really care where things are very much, and it's an overstatement. But traditionally, we just care about how fast the cars are moving out on the highway, because we don't really know where people are going. We just know that there's a loop detector here, and that's the big data that we've had, is loop detectors and counts of cars. And we know how many there are, and because we know the distance between the loop detectors, how fast they're going. We don't know how many people are in them. We don't know where they started and where they're ending. So we can't plan for any of that. To the extent that we can, it's really, really old school. And old school meaning we give every 10 years or so in a metropolitan area, we hand out a bunch of 2-day diaries to people. They fill it out as they travel around. Inaccurately, because they get sick of it after like the first 3 hours. They don't count walking because they don't really consider that a trip, and so that gets undercounted.
They underestimate the length of every trip.
Yeah, and so on and on. And it costs $1 million per round or whatever it is, and so cities and metropolitan areas don't do it very often. So that's what we based it on, and we would only do a small sample. We do a couple thousand in a metropolitan area. So now what do we have? We have We have data. We have data from cell phones. We have data from GPS devices. And it's really, really, really exciting. We know there's already a vendor out there that is buying data from Verizon and Sprint and then remarketing it. They are not, I will say, they're not setting the world on fire. They're the first in. There's a lot more opportunity. Somebody can get AT&T and U.S. Cellular and a few others. They might give them a run for the money, but they can now tell us where people are going, not just how many cars are on the road at a given time, but they have 50% of the market of cell phones, and it's not 2,000 people. It's in a market. It's half of the people. So we don't have a sample. We don't have to guess and estimate and everything and extrapolate. We know. We can see day to day. GPS is another technology that is super exciting in the same vein. Connected vehicles, Fitbit, wearables, these are all coming online, and this is even newer, and in a way even better because it's so granular. You can tell within 5 meters with a GPS device where people are. In some cases, with a cell phone, it's much less. And so you can tell what lane people are in. Are they in the frontage road? Are they on the lane? Are they traveling in a transit-served area but not taking transit? And so maybe why is that? So tons and tons of upside into this new area. And I think Beth is going to talk about applying this to performance measures, which is a whole different area. But as far as diagnosing transportation system problems and solving them in a sustainable way for multi-modes, it's a whole new world. A whole new world. And there, again, it's public sector, move slowly. Part of the problem is just getting the agencies to make use of this as it comes online, as opposed to something that's private and more nimble. But once it takes hold, it's a great entrepreneurship opportunity, and it's truly, truly has the potential to be disruptive and change the way we fund and think about transportation. So, with that, will you pass it on, or should we do questions? Okay.
Hi everybody, I'm Beth Osborne. I'm with an organization now called Transportation for America. We're a coalition of local chambers, elected officials, and transportation planners from across the country in communities big and small. Before this, I was at the U.S. Department of Transportation. I was Assistant Secretary and Deputy Assistant Secretary for Transportation Policy under the current Secretary, Anthony Fox, and under Ray LaHood before him. And have been this issue, all of what Eric was just talking about, kind of developed out of a conversation we had back when I was at USDOT, where I was talking about all this availability of new data. And the reason I was talking about it is Congress did something really interesting and good. Mark your calendars. Back in 2012, overall, the bill that controls our surface transportation bill, or our surface transportation program, I think was terrible, except for one thing. It set up a system of performance management for how our money is spent. And it laid out several areas that every state Department of Transportation and every metropolitan planning organization would have to evaluate the projects that they prioritize by. Now, it was not a complete list, it was not a perfect list, but it was a good start. And it's areas that we have a lot of familiarity with in the transportation world in terms of safety, so the number of fatalities and serious injuries on roadways, state of repair issues like pavement conditions and bridge conditions, but then more systematic issues like congestion, mobile source emissions, and then the performance of the national highway system and the performance of the interstate system. And what that's going to mean will dictate whether or not the transportation investments going forward are creating strong communities that can support lots of small local businesses and those places where you're going to go have a coffee by the side of the road, those places where you're going to go shop, or whether it's going to be a speedway that is lined with auto dealerships and pawn shops. And in the transportation world, we don't want to admit that we impact those decisions, but we not only impact them, we dictate them. And the sort of measure that is chosen can push the state DOTs in a direction that continues that myopic approach that we don't have anything to do with these decisions, or it can force them to think about it in a new way. But the number one barrier to thinking about this issue has been lack of data. And so when I was at US DOT and I would ask, well, can we measure person throughput? So not just how many cars go through an area, but how many people go through an area on bikes, on foot, on a bus, in a car. And in a car is important too. It's not just the vehicle. How many people are in each one of those vehicles? The answer was no, we can't do that. We have no idea. Of course we can. We can track their cell phones. We'll know exactly how many people are in a vehicle. We'll know exactly how many people are on a bus. And based on the speed at which the signal is moving, we'll know which mode they're using. I mean, it's an extraordinarily detailed system. But the basic position of the transportation planners is we don't know how to do this. There's also a private side to this that my organization is getting more heavily involved in. We've been tracking the number of big companies that are moving their headquarters away from suburban office parks into downtown areas. And they're doing it for a couple reasons. They're doing it to have better access to their employees, and they're doing it because people are tired of having to eat in the company cafeteria. And there was a big kerfuffle from an industry that was in Northern Virginia, close to Washington, D.C., that wanted to move out to a huge office park way outside of town. And when their company employees said, well, where will we eat lunch? Because right now we're in the middle of this great area with tons of restaurants and tons of activity. They said, well, we'll build a cafeteria. And there was practically a riot. And people would, so there's this huge changing attitude, particularly millennials that are highly trained and highly educated, just are not going to put up with that nonsense anymore. And we're watching the companies now chase the talent to more walkable, energy efficient, location efficient communities. But they are struggling to figure out in all communities where those best locations are. And that is, again, a data issue. I have heard of some folks that are starting to map what they call access to opportunity or access to work. And you can, instead of just looking at people's access to jobs, you can tell the employers where they'll have the most access to employees. But there's a lot more work that could be done there. There's a lot of working that could be done on parking. We expend an unbelievable amount of land and money on parking spaces that are a drain on our economy. Every acre that is dedicated to parking spaces is taken out of our economic system. And a lot of that is based on the notion that these companies cannot attract customers there without that parking space. But it's really a complete lack of access to data. So my example is in Washington, D.C., where I live, because everything revolves around me, where we were one of the most under-retailed cities in the country, because retailers determine where to move based on car counts, and 60% of trips in Washington, D.C. are done outside of a car. So the retailers just decided that there was no money there, in spite of the fact it's one of the most wealthy communities in the country. And it took a long time to convince them to move in. Well, we had a huge breakthrough about 7 years ago, after a long fight about a very transit-served area. It's right across from the subway stop. It's in a huge bus area where I believe 6 or 7 different lines cross. And the developer insisted that the city pay for a parking lot underneath it with something like 2,000 spaces. It's also in one of the densest areas of DC where the majority of people could walk there. And the city finally caved after almost a decade of fighting with them about this parking lot. Well, fast forward to now, and I went down to take a picture of the parking lot on Black Friday, and all I could find was a picture of a car that had tarp over it that was in storage. and it was completely empty, while the Target upstairs was jam-packed full of people, and the city is losing $3.5 million a year on it. And it comes out of our school budget, by the way. And my kid's school needs a new everything. So these have real impacts, and helping these developers understand where the parking needs really are, and what doing parking audits and things like that would be another huge data area that could save a community a lot of land, a lot of money, and actually save developers a lot of money as well. So I will stop there and pass it on.
Thanks. My name is Mark Wong, and I'm going to start by telling you who I'm not. If you look at your program, I'm supposed to be Harrison Rue, who is the head of transit-oriented development for the city. And I'm an IT guy, I'm the CIO for the city, but I do spend fully, actually a minimum of 25% of my time on transit, transportation, and transit-oriented development. This is a huge initiative for the city, and it's mandated by our mayor. So we are serious about solving our transit and transportation needs. I want to tell you a little about myself. I really can relate to you guys. I think some of you are entrepreneurs and hackers and developers, and I started out in your shoes with borrowed $5,000 from my dad, and I built it into the state's largest IT company, which we ran for 30 years. We were doing close to $90 million a year, which on the mainland is nothing, but you know, in Hawaii, that's big. That puts you in the top 100. So I encourage you to keep it up. It is possible to make it in Hawaii. You don't have to leave to do this. I used to joke that my middle name was Data, because the name of my company was Commercial Data Systems. So when, after I sold my company, I retired, and the mayor asked me to come and really transform IT at the city. So I'm not a transportation expert, I'm not a transit expert. I did grow up here, and I know how horrendous traffic has become since I was a little kid, when we didn't even have a freeway, and now the freeways are clogged virtually every hour of the waking day. But I'm here today to really help you kickstart an application to help solve our problems. So I want you to think of me as your conduit to the data that you need. Within the city, I'm responsible for all technology except for the board of water supply. So if it has to do with the bus or even the rail, construction, road repair, it somehow passes through my door. So I want to give you a little background of the structure of the city, because as you develop your apps, you're going to have to get your data from somewhere. Now, I know the state has some data, and I'm not going to speak about the state. I'm only going to tell you what the city can provide, because there is a lot of confusion about what is city and what is state. The state has a Department of Transportation. We have a Department of Transportation Services. So I'm relatively new to the city, but I think of it this way. State has highways and freeways, city has roads and just about everything else. That may not be completely accurate, but that's a good way to think about it. So traffic signals, bus falls under DTS, HART is affiliated with DTS. So any active type of transportation is DTS, and they have a lot of the information that you're going to need. They operate the traffic signals, and we are building a new joint traffic management center, which should be up in about 2 years or so. And a lot of the information should be consolidated at that point. But until then, it's still in pieces. We have HART, and that's a system that's basically under construction, but we have some of that data on our site. Probably one of the most useful sources of information right now is from the Oahu Transit Services, which is the bus. And one of, we call my department DIT, Department of Information Technology. But one of the most popular apps in the city is the bus. It's an app that was developed at a hackathon by 2 of my employees with information that's available to you today. In fact, the data is much better than it is today. So I'm going to tell you where to get some of this data in a minute. We have the Department of Design and Construction, which is in charge of basically designing our streets and infrastructure. We have planning and permitting, which is their big project is transit-oriented development. So what we want to see in our city that's growing up around rail stations, we want to see fewer parking stalls. We're reducing the requirement. We want to encourage people to walk. We want you guys to come up with wayfinding apps. Help people find where the restaurants are, where a doctor is, when the next bus is coming. How can I get to bike share? And we're working with Ben on trying to make sure that our systems integrate in with bike share. That we have, oh, I didn't bring it with me. Our smart NFC card, which will be the single card to get access to all forms of transit within the city. And last but not least, the Department of Information Technology, which is me. Most of you will be very surprised to see the types of things that we do in-house, but it is quickly becoming, I think, the leading IT shop in town. It's very advanced thinking. We're doing things like Hadoop databases and massively scalable systems with thousands of cores. Just a side note, I built the 10th fastest computer in the world as part of my last business, so I do have some experience doing that. I'm trying to bring that into the city. So let's get to the meat of this. If you haven't accessed this yet, there is a site called data.honolulu.gov. Bert's very familiar with it. But we completely redid it about a month and a half ago. So it has a new look. There's some new data on there. There's some stuff I threw up this afternoon. Still working on it. So if you've been to it before, you know that you can get information on crime and traffic incidents. You can find out all about our streets, bus routes, where the rail is going. Some of the things that we've added, and we're continuing to work on this, is an inventory of all the parking structures and metered stalls within the city. So some of that was put up today, but some of the geocoding isn't there. It's about half done. It'll be done tomorrow. We are looking at a consolidated system to record all street disruptions. So usage permits, closures, water main breaks, ambulances, the street closed, all those traffic advisories. We're looking for a single place that you can get all of that and be notified, and that doesn't exist in the city yet. So that's going to be a big thing, and it'll feed Nixle and some of these other text notification systems that we have. We're looking at putting at least filtered 911 data on there. So you know that a 911 call can really disrupt traffic. But we don't have any visibility to that, and even within the city we don't have visibility because there's so much siloed data within there. So please take a look at that site. I want to make an offer that if there's something that you want there for an app, if you let me know right away, there's a chance that we can get it on there by Friday. We have very agile development team, and we can move very quickly on some of these things. Just don't ask me for something really complicated, but if it's some data that you think is out there in the city, we will fight to get that put up, at least in part, so you can get your app developed. Because I think it's very important for you to advance the state of apps within the city. So that means probably coming up with something that's not solved yet, and maybe the data doesn't exist to help you do that, but I'm here to work with you to get that done. We're not here just to run the city. One of our mandates is to work with the public to help advance technology within the city. So please, I'll have a few cards up here, but you can go to honolulu.gov and find me pretty easily. I'm the CIO for the city. I just want to briefly tell you about our biggest project in years. How many of you have watched Person of Interest? That's it? How about Hawaii Five-0? A few? Okay. Well, you know how these TV shows, they go to some fancy touchscreen and they have access to everything that's going on in the city, right? Oh, here's where this person lives. A water main broke. Oh, there's an ambulance here. This person had a traffic arrest 3 years ago. Well, you know, the city has all that data. It's just not accessible in one place. Well, we're putting that system together. It is based on an IBM product called Smarter Cities. And IBM, the head of IBM Smarter Cities, has identified Hawaii as a potential showcase installation for this platform. So the city and county already has the software. It came compressed on 74 DVDs, which I spent days and days and days loading. But we think that we're going to have it up pretty soon. We're going to put up video walls and integrate every piece of data we can get our hands on. One of the interesting things that this can do is video analytics. So you want to know how many people are crossing the sidewalk at any given time of day. Are they crossing the wrong way? What is the traffic flow? How many people are on motorcycles? How much usage in the bike lanes? Did someone leave a suspicious package in front of a store? These are existing capabilities with a video analytics system, and we've already procured quite a few licenses. We're looking at more for HART when that comes online. But the great thing is, we won't have to sit there and watch these screens and try to figure out what's going on. It's going to count it all for us automatically, 24/7. So that's a very exciting component of the smarter cities. Some things that are going to be coming online, but we don't have them. We have not made a decision on this yet. Is for the new Joint Traffic Management Center. I am pushing to get the transportation piece on that. So you imagine that you detect a water main break. The system can automatically reroute all the buses, adjust the traffic signals, and notify the state and all the other partners in the JTMC to adjust traffic patterns so that we don't end up with the kind of mess that we did with the zipper lane failure. I think we're maybe halfway to convincing them to do that, but if we manage to do this, we will have a completely integrated city where data is at our fingertips and that we can easily push out the non-sensitive parts to open data. So that, I'm thrilled to be able to tell you guys about that. I think you're the first ones outside of city cabinet to hear about this. But we're working on that, and I'd love to invite you to take a look at that when that's up. I just wanted to give you some ideas of things that I think might work for us in the city for an app. Ride sharing hasn't really taken off, but there must be some way that we can do some type of carpooling very easily with an app, and I don't think anybody's really addressed that. We have the bus app that we wrote, but it hasn't been updated very much. Maybe you might want to say, I want to leave home between this hour and this hour, especially if it's when service is very infrequent. Alert me when the bus is within running distance so I can get there and catch the bus. I don't think we have anything like that. Very little in the way of wayfinding. There is almost no centralized system within the city for event planning and notification. So if you've ever driven into Waikiki and the Hardball is going on or the Spam Fest, you know, stay away from there, right? But how often do we drive into Waikiki? We don't know that, and we sit and wait in traffic for an hour. Our passengers get out while we, you know, walk to the hotel, and we show up an hour later when we manage to find a parking space. So that's something I think that could be very useful. And as we push out these construction and traffic advisories, which I think you're going to see in a few days, there is no app to handle that yet. So keep an eye on the data.honolulu.gov. Hopefully by Friday, you'll see something. You can start developing some apps and surprise us. So that's sort of our job. We'll take care of the plumbing. We want you guys to do the apps and do the innovative stuff that everybody says the government can't do. So, thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Wow, that is so awesome. I'm so excited about all of this, hearing about it. So I'd love to see, first of all, if you guys have any questions. Yes. Can you give us your name too? And
thanks for joining me, guys. I'm going to be concluding this stream and let the questions get asked, and maybe I'll start it up if we have a great discussion going. Thanks a lot. Bye.